Hi, I'm Andrew Brown, and this presentation is a reading of my book chapter, Musicianship in a Globalised World. Musical experiences in the 21st century have arguably become more varied than ever before, and our knowledge about music making is more detailed than in any previous century. In response, our understanding of musicianship and how it can be developed warrants revisiting. The opportunities and challenges for contemporary music making are shaped by a variety of forces, including increased access to musical heritage through global trade, audio-visual recording and internet distribution. New insights into musical thoughts and behaviours from research into topics such as music and the brain, new technologies for music production and consumption, and mobile devices and their apps expand and democratise participation and access to music. Finally, the economic and social impacts surrounding the changes that result in the repositioning of music as a discipline from the arts and crafts now to be really considered as the creative industries. All of these changes impact upon musicianship and are reasons why we need to reconsider it. My contention is that a discussion about musicianship that responds to these contextual trends needs to move beyond the narrow and limited sense in which the term musicianship is frequently used. Musicianship, for the purposes of this presentation, is defined to be a person's ability to perceive, understand and create sonic experiences. Musicianship involves awareness of musical features, the facility to articulate and interpret these features and their effects. Musicianship involves the capacity to demonstrate understanding through analysis, imitation and generation of music. Musicianship is independent of, but necessary for, technical competence with music technologies, including musical instruments, theoretical and notation systems and audio production technologies. Musicianship can be personally expressed either vocally or through bodily gestures or through language usage. But it is also maximally expressed for many people through a technological medium or process, such as through a musical instrument or a composition system. Musicianship is an individual or personal ability, but it is always contextual. It includes the perception and understanding of musicianship in others, and the musical opportunities afforded by cultures and objects are very important to be able to understand. Musicianship, therefore, contributes to a person's capacity for effective musical interaction, collaboration, leadership and dissemination. A personal musicianship has many dimensions. 5 that seem critical to achieving a comprehensive musicianship are oral awareness, embodiment, imagination, representation and interaction. The first of these, oral awareness, includes the ability to listen carefully and critically to sound and to inform this ability with knowledge about how sounds are produced, both naturally as acoustic sounds and technologically via instruments and other technological tools. The second is embodiment, the phenomenological experience of music that involves sensation, gesture and movement, along with all of the associated motor and coordination skills. The third, imagination, involves intellectual experiences of music, including perception, judgment, meaning and invention. Fourth is representation, how music is notated or recorded in some external form. These representations then provide opportunities for reflection, creation and sharing. This presentation discusses musicianship using 4 categories: music as sound and data, music as perception and imagination, music as gesture and movement, and music as cultural construction. First, let's look at music as sound and data. Music is often described as organised sound. Not surprisingly, therefore, there have long been advocates for understanding the physics of sound as a foundational aspect of musicianship, especially aspects such as the harmonic series and its impact on harmony, timbre and musical time. During the 20th century, with the development of sound recording and amplification through loudspeakers, the sonic implications and possibilities of music expanded significantly, Outcomes included electronic and electroacoustic music, musique concrète, and recording studio production methods. In the early 21st century, the distribution of recorded music became dominated by digital file downloads and streaming. As a result, an appreciation of music as sound and data seems to be a critical aspect of contemporary musicianship in the digital age. Notions of what constituted the musical world exploded in the mid to late 20th century. This was largely due to the ideas of composers such as John Cage, who expanded the range of sonic materials and contexts that could be understood as being musical, and of acoustic ecologists such as Murray Schafer, who urged us to pay closer attention to the sounds of our natural world. While a sound-first approach that prioritises making music before notating it is commonly advocated by some music education traditions, such as Kodály, Suzuki, Montessori and Ulf Schulwerk, these approaches have typically limited themselves to the sounds of voice and orchestral instruments. The more radical idea from that era has been less frequently found in music education circles, but some have, through practices such as ear cleaning exercises, sound walks, soundscape compositions, DIY instrument building and experimental improvisation, included these ideas in musicianship training. Generally, an exploratory approach to sound seems to have been limited to activities for younger children or to musically inexperienced groups, rather than taken seriously as part of the advanced music studies. However, in an era of extensive auditory and cultural diversity, a focus on listening deeply and being open to the musical affordances of any sound or situation seemed quite appropriate. In the digital age, especially in light of widespread sound sampling and appropriation of music, a shift is required in the way we listen and think about sound and music. In addition to the open-mindedness extolled by the likes of Cage and Schafer, a range of new practices have emerged, while traditional roles such as composer and performer have been dissolved or combined. Today's digital musicians may be involved in circuit bending, coding software, network jamming, and other activities like these alongside more established music and sound practices such as instrumental performance or singing. Contemporary musicians may refer to themselves as producers, sound artists, digital artists, or live coders, and may see little distinction between their roles as a musical creator, a presenter, distributor, curator, or entrepreneur. They may even blur boundaries of what used to be described as disciplines, and see little difference between digital expression realised as sound, visual image, animation, design, architecture, dance, or even fabrication. While accommodating, under the heading of musicianship, the broad array of skills and knowledge required for these contemporary practices, this can present a challenge to educators. I understand that a good place to start is with a foundational understanding of sound, and how, especially as digital data, it can be captured, manipulated, and communicated. Next, let's consider music as perception and imagination. While music may exist physically as sound or in representations such as scores, it is in the interpretation of music through our senses where much of our musicianship is to be found. With so much of our musical ability devoted to listening, understanding and imagining, the operation of the musical mind is a significant topic of interest. There has been renewed interest in music perception in recent times, driven by research developments in neuroscience in particular. Much of our understanding, however, rests on developments in the psychology of music gathered over the last 100 years or so, and there's plenty of information available from this research to productively inform musical practices. Of particular relevance are the insights of psychoacoustic studies describing how the ear and the mind interpret sonic inputs. For instance, the fact that pitch and interval distances appear in a linear relationship in notation, whilst equivalent frequency relationships in acoustic signals follow a logarithmic curve. Other insights from psychoacoustic studies include explanations for experiences of consonance and dissonance, timbral blending and masking, the ability to detect the direction of sound sources, whether or not sound sources are stationary or in motion, and audible cues relating to the size and properties of physical space based on reflections and reverberation characteristics. Our ability to identify, track, imagine, confuse multiple concurrent musical parts through processes of auditory streaming has rightfully gained particular attention in studies about how we hear and how we understand musical structures. Many of these aural abilities have been associated not only with aesthetics and emotions, but also with adaptive and survival qualities in the human species. This has led to much speculation about how human capabilities are exploited for musical purposes, and whether or not music making simply leverages these general capacities or contributes to their development on an evolutionary timescale. Related to this is the issue surrounding the degree to which musical skills are innate or learned, the nature versus nurture debate. Tied to this debate is the identification and development of musical talent, which has long been central to music education theories. Unsurprisingly, developmental studies in music psychology and psychoacoustics suggest that innate musicianship and intellectual potential make some contribution to musicianship, but these studies also reveal that training both enhances innate capabilities and develops new ones. Often, developmental potential becomes especially evident when experimental results differentiate between musicians or non-musicians in many of these perception studies. Clearly, perceptual and cognitive processes are significant contributors to musicianship, as they can turn sounds into mental structures powerful enough to produce aesthetic and emotional responses. However, as ecological psychologists make clear, the mind does not act alone, but in concert with the body and with environmental and cultural contexts. Musicianship is also related to gesture and movement. Inasmuch as music is a sonic phenomena or a mindful experience, it is also an activity. More often than not, music making is the result of human activity. Christopher Small makes strong views on this, claiming that, and I quote, "Music is not a thing at all, but an activity, something that people do," end of quote. Put simply, human gestures create music, from the banging of a drum to the singing of a lyric and the conducting of an ensemble. The body is, according to David Borgo, the fundamental musical instrument through which everyone first creates and apprehends music. It is simultaneously a music producer and a music transducer, end of quote. Gestures are also used for non-sonic purposes in music, for audience enhancement of a performance or to coordinate with others in an ensemble. Performative skills have long been a central aspect of musicianship studies, especially in the form of singing melodies, scales and intervals, or performing rhythmic patterns and exercises. Contemporary music research reinforces the centrality of bodily capacity in consolidating and demonstrating musical understanding. Pedagogical trends emphasise developing musicianship through the authentic and holistic music-making activities rather than through decontextualised graded exercises. As humans, we are also prone to respond to music through movement, from simple tapping of the foot or nodding of the head to swaying and dancing. Bodily movement and sonic and musical gestures have interesting parallels. These connections can be quite direct, as in the case of playing an acoustic instrument, or they can be metaphoric, as in the case of an arm gesture corresponding to a melodic phrase. Appreciating the direct and indirect connections between bodily and sonic gestures has had implications for the idea that music can be understood as a sonic movement in time and space. In some cases, this insight has been at the heart of techniques for training musicians. The cognitive significance of gestures and movement goes beyond a strong connection between body and mind. It's also implicated in shaping perception through the active repositioning of ourselves in relation to sound sources within a listening space, for example. Although some Western musical traditions employ stationary and passive music listening conventions, such as concert halls, in other practices, bodily movement and the shifting of listening positions is used to engage the body more directly in music appreciation, for example, dancing to music at nightclubs. A final but important spatial aspect affecting music is the acoustic space in which it is made and which it's heard. Relevant considerations for acoustic spaces include the design of a concert hall or recording studio, the use of multi-loudspeaker arrays for music playback, and ambient environmental sounds, a topic which is the focus of studies in acoustic ecology. These types of connections between human movement, physical context and music may at times be so closely coupled that they are employed intuitively. In these cases, our physical actions and responses constitute musical knowledge as a form of embodied cognition. The significance of embodied musicianship to music training has informed many educational practices that emphasise the linking of sound and movement, especially in young children. These ideas found particularly clear articulation in the eurythmics movements developed by Émile Jacques Delcroze in the early part of the 20th century. Such embodied knowledge is an important part of musicianship. It can be developed through training and purposeful repetition, and can, through performance, reveal musical sensitivity and understanding that may be inexpressible by other means. The music education researcher David Elliott, who writes in some detail about musicianship, goes further, claiming that musicianship is demonstrated in action, not words. End of quote. Whilst music articulated as gesture and movement is clearly a critical aspect of musicianship and constitutes embodied knowledge located within the musician, we do not act alone. The socio-cultural aspects of musicianship are also critical. So finally, let's consider music as a cultural construction. Music is a human construction, and musical capacities are distributed throughout the social and physical environment. We act within an environment of tools, other objects, and previous musical practices and works, that is, within a socio-cultural context. This contextual view of musicianship has become more prominent in recent years, inspired by research in fields such as ecological psychology, situated cognition, activity theory, and distributed intelligence. These insights show that musicianship is more than just a personal ability, that it depends on circumstances specific to particular cultures, musical genres, and technological opportunities. As well, ethical implications of music making emerge from this contextual perspective in regard to cultural sensitivity, access to participation, and resource distribution. A theory about how such a contextual perspective impacts on learning theory is articulated by Sacha Barab and Jonathan Plucker, who suggest that although talent may be reserved by some to describe individuals possessing exceptional ability, and ability may be described as an internal trait, in our description, that's their description, neither ability nor talent are possessed. Instead, they are treated as an equivalent term that can be used to describe functional transactions that are situated across person in situation. End of quote. Barab and Plucker also suggest that there is a democratic implication in situations where the opportunity to engage with a supportive context, that is to access what they call individual environment transactions, may be more significant than the individual talent or ability. Even though their position may be more radical than most, it underscores the importance of the cultural context for music making and has implications for ethical educational practices. It also reminds us that music is a cultural construction and that musicianship includes awareness of historical and contemporary practices and relies on fluency with appropriate tools and representational systems. Music can be social on many levels, including shared listening, constant attendance, ensemble performance, collaborative composition and improvisation, and public performance or the distribution of recorded material. Socio-cultural activities such as these enhance the meaningfulness of music making and allow participants to share musical experiences or to work with others in the pursuit of a shared creative goal. Communities in which music making takes place consist of many identifiable cultures and subcultures. In a globalised world, the access to these is ever increasing. Cultures may be based in the traditions of geographic regions or based on similarities in age or gender. They may also form around musical genres or styles, or be defined by modes of practice or by the technologies employed. We may therefore talk about, for example, classical, African, techno, jazz, brass, vocal, electronic or improvised musical subcultures. Important subcultures also form around age groupings, and the examination of children's or youth cultures has gained increasing attention in educational literature. Additionally, in recent times, we have witnessed the accelerated rise of online culture, where music is made or shared via the internet. A distinctive characteristic of any musical culture is how music is represented. Some traditions focus primarily on oral communication, while others have well-developed forms of notation. As well, music representations are embedded in the tools and the instruments of a culture. They define, for example, particular tuning systems, timbral preferences, and other parts of that culture. Familiarity with these representations can be critical in accessing and participating in the practices of these musical traditions. Much attention has therefore been paid in musicianship studies to notation systems, particularly stave notation. However, the appropriateness of specific notation systems and other technologies as part of musicianship studies corresponds to the local requirements of relevant cultures or subcultures. Finally, cultures are dynamic entities. Even though many practices persist through conventions, cultures are also sites of innovation. Cultural evolution is activated by interaction and dialogue amongst practitioners and audiences. Despite Christopher Small and David Elliott's emphasis on embodied musicianship, it is also important for musicians to have the ability to participate in a dialogue about music and its place in society. A person's capacity to contribute to cultural development through innovation and provocation is dependent upon their skills of analysis and critique. Musicianship can therefore be seen to include 1. A high level of facility with cultural conventions, 2. The skills and understandings necessary to effectively participate in those cultures, and 3. The critical and imaginative capacities required to progress cultural development. So, in conclusion, in recent decades, there have been significant changes to musical practices and our methods of accessing them. Our notions of musicianship, therefore, need to develop in order to accommodate these changes. Because the trend towards a more globalised society is likely to continue, I've outlined aspects to consider as we reassess what musicianship means and how it can be developed. This included a categorisation of music as sound, perception, movement and culture. Categories designed to illuminate important perspectives of the complex whole that is music and thus of musicianship. Because it is impossible to accommodate all aspects of all musical practices into a single musicianship study program, it's likely that the curation of customised portfolios of skills, knowledge and experience will need to be developed for each context. There will not be just one musicianship, perhaps there never has been, but rather a personal or local musicianship that is soundly based in relevant music-making practices. It appears that a way forward for musicianship education is, to coin a phrase, to think globally but act locally. That is, to consider the breadth of possibilities but focus on those skills and abilities pertinent to a person's musical interests. In this way, the development of musicianship can be seen to bear a strong relationship to to the development of craftsmanship, which Richard Sennett suggests has three foundational abilities: the ability to localise, to question and to open up. The first involves making a matter concrete, the second reflecting on its qualities, and the third expanding its sense." End of quote. This would suggest that musicianship studies should 1. Focus learning activities around authentic and relevant musical tasks and examples. 2. Be open-ended enough to promote reflection and critique of a musician's own work and the work of others and of the task itself. And 3. Focus elaboration and innovation rather than limit tasks to imitation and repetition. Thanks for watching and listening. This presentation is based upon my chapter Musicianship in a Globalised World, published in the book Sound Musicianship, Understanding the Crafts of Music, released in 2012. The book is available as an e-book or a hardcover from Amazon online.